going to take a look at keeping the bodies together in promenade position, and right now specifically in the tango, so we're not having to deal with the swinging action of the hips as we would have in that second step. It's very easy for the pelvis to slip forward. And many people have difficulty feeling the separation of the leg bones, the thigh, from the torso, and picturing the torso and the spine as going all the way to the tailbone. This is all torso. Now, it's true that we talk about the legs starting up much higher, and there's many ways that that manifests itself. But right now we want to be aware of the trunk being separated from the legs. When we get into sideways motions with big swings and we have to take the hips with the legs, then it becomes a little bit more complicated. So the tango is a good place to start with getting that separation. When we do that, it's so easy for this to happen, and it feels to most people as if they're straight. So when the gentleman takes his hips forward, he loses the girl. And I hear sometimes from the men too about their partners or about their students, they'll tell the ladies that they're too fast, they're too early. And sometimes that's true, but many times what it is the same thing with the ladies, is they're slipping the pelvis underneath and dropping their back, the upper part of their back, behind them. And so the foot goes out very early. So then sometimes we may try to correct that, and the woman is just slower, but she's still slipping into that position. So in order to feel that, we have to visit the psoas muscle. I've done some videos explaining a little bit more about the psoas. The psoas is very involved in keeping our low spine back. And in order to separate the leg and the torso, we have to be able to feel that this area, the low spine, is kept back. It's not kept back in an arch, bending the lumbar spine, but it's a sensation of the lower spine or the lumbar spine moving away from the leg to free the leg up. The psoas is the deepest muscle attached to your spine, and it attaches all the way up to the base of the rib cage. It comes up from the thighs and fans out through the pelvis and then comes up into that area. So being the closest muscle there, big muscle, abdominal muscle, underneath all the other ones, that's crucial in getting that activated. So it's more than holding a position, it's also an active movement away from the direction of travel. So I can have a feeling that my intention to move forward is felt from my engine in the upper part of my back, or imagining my ribcage sitting on a tray, and that tray needs to move evenly, and a feeling of the lower spine moving in the opposite direction. Again, not in an arch, but in this sensation of moving up and back. In the Alexander technique, we talk about keeping the back back, that we're not letting the spine move forward and open up the rib cage like that. If we use a plumb line, this will be my little plumb line here, we talk about the weight fall, vertical line through the fall of our weight, or the blocks of our weight. So we're not having the spine in a straight line, the spine is curved, but the weight fall goes down through those curves, let's say in the line of the way the water would fall. So I'm using this more of a plumb line effect because it moves. And so you can imagine that weight falling down from about where your ears are, and then falling down through the shoulder line and through the midpoint about where your side seam would be, and then falling down to the front of the ankle. So now if the weight fall is vertical like this, there are times when our body will move around that weight fall. For instance, in Paso Doble. So now I've moved my center of gravity in front of that line. So my body's now in a curve. But the weight fall, which is where the head would balance over the feet, the weight fall is still in a vertical line. I could use a stick, but the stick is not as mobile, so sometimes it's good to have an actual plumb line. So if that were my vertical line of weight fall, so if I'm doing the Paso Doble or I'm doing an oversway line, now that line is no longer going through my spine the way it would be when I'm standing vertically. So we'll look at that more in the swing dance. But for the tango, we can think more of that verticality, again, the verticality of how the weight goes through the bones, instead of thinking, oh, I'm trying to make my spine perfectly straight. That's a dangerous place to be. So when we're moving, now we want the thighs to move forward, and we want the shins to move forward across the feet. But what's so easy to do now is to forget about the upper spine or the separation there of where the thigh separates from the trunk. So to many people it feels as though they're sticking their butt out. So I will do that, and of course that would be wrong. Now this part of my weight is behind me. So now the opposite. Then you have the man's head in line with the lady's head. So as we keep our heads apart, we feel the tray here, we feel the tray here, and we feel the separation of the trunk from the legs. So difficult to do, you need somebody to help you because the feeling is so different if you're used to standing, especially like this. And even people who don't stand like that begin often to dance with the legs coming through. On the ladies' end, the same thing. I'll have that sense of my low spine moving back and up. So that as the leg is beginning to come through, I'm not trying to push my hips through. Now there will be a gap between us. Or sometimes a lady will say, I can't catch up to the man, and it's because the man's underneath is so far ahead of her and she doesn't feel that connection of that long line going vertically down. So we'll look at that also in another video on a swing dance, where we do have to know when to swing the hips, when the body goes into the weight fall. Although it's vertical, there will be more curves in the body. We'll look at that. That's a little more complicated. But what we don't want to do is confuse swinging the bell or swinging the center of gravity with tucking the pelvis and letting the pelvis become part of the leg in a forward action.